So today, people are asking about, yes, sacred sexuality, and I'll talk about that, but some specific topics. Now, this is going to be strange for some folks that might be suddenly tuning in for the first time, going, "Well, Spiritual Insights by Michael Mirdad. This will be about spirituality, forgiveness, love, oneness, etc." And here we're going to talk about something very specific in regards to sexuality, and that's going to be the topic of what you guys asked. What's going on, like orgasms, why sometimes spontaneous orgasms, and what that's about, or energy sex, meaning astral sex and energy experiences. So you asked for it, you got it. So let's go for it. And thanks for your courage to ask these kinds of questions, all right? Let me start this talk off with a quick story. And it's not about astral sex, and it's not about energy orgasms and these kinds of things per se, but it's a funny story to help keep things light, because we really should keep things light when it comes to topics that are so battered, so messed up, confused, abused, and so on. Keeping things light is so important. Keeping things loving is very important. I've always said sexuality, if you're really asking me, how do you summarize Tantra, sacred sexuality? How do you summarize really like sacred union? Just because two people get together and have intercourse does not for sacred make. It just doesn't work that way. You don't just say, well, all sex is sacred, because it's not true. Two people without sacred attitudes are not having sacred sex, because if the mindset isn't there, because the consciousness is everything. The consciousness we have behind things is everything. It really sets the whole tone. So if people aren't in the right mindset, consciousness set, heart set, then it's not a right consciousness or right experience. So sacred means you're coming from a sacred space. So when people ask, can you summarize Tantra, sacred sexuality? Is it positions? Is it how long you make love? Is it hours or what? It's not anything external, really. Those things are the dressing, that's it. But it's not, those aren't the core of it all. Really, love and respect is what sets the tone. Love and respect. Now, I'm not saying you have to be in love, madly in love, partnered forever, etc. But can you have absolute love? And the reason I added respect when I started teaching many years ago on this topic is because some people would go, when I said love, and other people would say, "Oh yes, we're having a loving experience," and yet it wasn't. So too often they could lie and deceive and fool people into describe, telling people it was a loving experience, and it wasn't. They're just a lot of times people in this field, Tantra, sacred sexuality, and all that. It's real hypocritical. So you have to know that it's all real. And for that, I like that word respect, man. It just came through me one day and I kept it in there forever. Do you have love and respect? Do you have loving respect for whomever you're with? That's more important than if it's gay or straight, whether it's, 2 or 5 or all those things don't matter. How long you make love, all those things aren't going to matter if it's missing love and respect. If two people being together could guarantee that it's a sacred experience, then porn stars would be enlightened, and they are not. So, and I know because I've worked with many of them. No, I think they're as good a people as anybody else, just wounded like anybody else could be wounded, and have layers to be peeled off in terms of in the soul healing. We're all looking for that healing so that we can be more present with each other, with ourselves and with each other. And one of the things I really appreciate with the concept of sacred sexuality is that people are able to learn to be more present with one another, but at such a vulnerable level, at the physical level. You could have wounds, you could have shames, you could have body issues, and so on. And it creates, a little bit of inhibition. So to be able to say, but I trust you enough to just, whether it's disrobing materially or disrobing spiritually, emotionally, I just think it's the most fabulous thing in the world. And when I say having love and respect for a person, I have to sort of warn you, love can be addictive, but not in a negative way, not in a lie, the lies that we live with addictions. Addictive meaning, it can be so good, because it is, that it draws us and makes us want more, and we should want more, because love is beautiful, it's real. It isn't the sensual that I'm talking about, it's the true respectful love, the honoring of another person, two or more gathered. And so that to me is a beautiful thing. The downside, though, is that I'm going to elaborate on, is that when you come into that space with a person and you do bring that love and respect, it can really woo them. It can really wow them. It can oh my God, I've never felt this kind of love. Love is so beautiful, so, if it's real, so beautiful and powerful that it can really open our hearts. And I'm not just talking about romantic love that seems to open our hearts. The real thing opens our soul. It opens our heart and soul. And then we start to get attached, which means we're now slipping out of the real love moment, which is kind of funny, but that's how ego works. It just hijacks everything, every impulse, into becoming something more limited and detoured. So keep it in mind that when I'm talking about these things, I'm going to share with you what I can in the amount of time given. And I think some of you are going to be maybe turned on, some of you turned off, some of you dismayed, some of you happy from it all. It's going to vary, because there's so many feelings, warped feelings around the topic of sexuality. So please be patient and forgiving if it triggers in any way, something inside. At the same time, if it, kind of woos you and wows you and, ooh, wow, this is cool, so sexy, sensual, that's cool too. Just remember, it's you. Don't have transference on me or the program, or, don't get so, heated up you got to run out to a nightclub and hook up with somebody because you're all in the mood. Don't let it distract you. Just let this take you deeper inside, whether we find a little bit of wounds inside or whether we find, wows inside. It's okay, as long as you recognize it's inside of you. Okay? All right. So, an odd story. Once when I was an adolescent, I had to go to the hospital for something. I think it was, because I think I've only been once, maybe tonsils, I guess. And I remember I was in there, and a nurse came in, comes in the room, and I'm sitting there, and then she says, pulls the curtain, and then gives me this little cup. And she says, and this was kind of common in these days, Southern California, when I was a kid, I lived for a few years, and she says, she wants a sample. So she says, I need, and she's saying a sputum sample, but she has an accent. So I'm an adolescent kid, and I have this nurse standing there saying, can I have a sputum sample? A what? A sputum sample. A what? I need to get a sputum. She's with an accent though, but I need to get a sputum sample. And I'm like, what do I do? And she's standing there, so I'm thinking, I'm sorry, man, but I'm serious. I'm like, do you send someone in to help, or are you the help, or do I have to do this alone? And if so, are you actually going to just stand here? Because this is kind of a buzzkill. What am I supposed to do? Because sexuality and sexual concepts and issues, they can just cause so many crazy things. So I'm just completely nervous and confused. And when I asked her enough times, she decided to repronounce it and say it in a different way. So she said, saliva. Oh, so there was a little lesson learned, but the awkwardness some of us have about these kinds of things, sexuality, and having to have exams, and just all these things. And of course, with it, there's also wounding and embarrassments and shames and things like that. But sometimes there's at least some funny stories we can share, and that are quite vulnerable. So hope you don't mind my sharing. All right. So as I was saying, there were a barrage of questions that you guys were asking related to this topic. And it's sort of, when I tried to distill all the questions on the Facebook group, I tried to distill them all down to a couple of specific questions, and I wrote them down to make sure I asked them correctly the way you guys asked them. But it mostly breaks down into those two topics I mentioned: energy, sex, and spontaneous orgasms, I guess we could say. So let's see. The first one, read through it. Oh, incidentally, I want to make this clear because we're going into such a vulnerable topic. I, as a teacher, on Tantra and sacred sexuality, it's just one, like I said, of a trillion topics I cover, but on that topic, I did workshops, I did lectures, conferences, all kinds of things. I've spoken on this topic, but all kinds of events, but even online courses. But and I've written a couple books on it. But the thing is, when people asked to come to my intensive, it's a very awkward experience because I don't just do things like bam, just do them, and people show up and I don't care. They just pay and I don't care. It's not like that, especially this topic. So we were quite, in a sense, selective. So it was like people would ask to be in the workshop. We would ask, well, what are you about? Because if people were overly shut down, closed-minded and so forth, then it was like, I'd rather them not be at the workshop. Not just because like I'm judging them. I'm respecting everyone else that's signing up. They need to not be judged at a workshop where they're going to be working on and discussing and sharing very vulnerable topics and personal experiences. So it's important that we don't have that. And I recommend this in your own lives in terms of just anything. You own a business, you can decide what kind of people you want working for you, what kind of vibe, tone you want to set. But I also wasn't interested in people that would say, oh, well, I don't have any of those inhibitions and those issues and judgments. I'm totally open. I know everything I need to know about sex. It's wonderful. I know everything. I've done everyone. They're just free and loose, so to speak. And I wouldn't have them either. I very much didn't want anybody who was going to be shut down and judgmental, nor people that the opposite they think is good. No, the opposite extreme, meaning people that thought they knew everything. No closed down judgmental. No, I already know it all. Which basically meant no nuns and no men. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So it's just like, no, I want the folks that are vulnerable. Now, if they're heavily wounded sexually, it may not be the right workshop. Maybe we should do private sessions and just work on those things so you have space and privacy. So I was very discerning, and I say was because I stopped teaching that officially, maybe 5 years ago or so. I forget, somewhere like that. And the reason I taught it was people would come for private sessions because when you typically go to a teacher on this topic, they would almost expect to be having sex. And I was like, well, let me just teach you about it so you can do this. Teach this to your partners, teach this to a friend or whatever, so that you're not asking me for this sort of thing. The workshops were very vulnerable, and they were, one in every 2 or 3 workshops, there would be somebody that still got a little too triggered or something. And those are kind of bummers, bummer experiences. But with that topic, gosh, you just know it's possible. And if you yourselves decide to explore that a little further, just remember, use discretion, decide who you're going to study with and what level of integrity you're okay with. And I would go for the highest level of integrity. Okay? So let's see. We're going to go into question number 1. This is going to be related to the idea of spontaneous orgasms. And there are actually a couple of questions on this particular topic. But on spontaneous orgasms, let me explain that the folks that just seem to have these like energy things that come to them, like literally, biologically, anatomically, they feel full arousal and orgasms. there are things that lead up to that. It's not like it's just you're supposed to have that. Gee, I want what she's having or he's having. I don't have that and I should. You know, those are, don't listen to those magazines at the checkout stands that tell you how messed up you are because you're not having what they tell you should be having. You need love and respect, not spontaneous orgasms. Love and respect takes you closer to heaven. Spontaneous orgasms do not. It just feels like it, but it's not going to do something for you spiritually per se. It's just a nice experience on this planet. If you could have both, that's ideal. So, you know, let's just be clear that the reason some people have those is because they're more naturally sexual or they're more naturally sensual. And there's a difference. Those of you who are making notes, you know, difference between those two. All right. All right. First, why is it that when we work on certain muscle groups or muscles in our body to a point of fatigue, this person, a couple of people were saying, yeah, I've had that happen. They have orgasms. When they work muscles to a point of fatigue. Now remember, there's, you know, naturally sexual, naturally sensual. Either of these things could apply to them. Because if you're naturally sensual or naturally sexual, it means you have a natural organic comfort level with your body and or with sexual arousals and so forth. So that will lend towards some of these things. So you know, being naturally sexual is different from naturally sensual, though. Naturally sexual can be people that are wounded and they have just a propensity towards sexual behaviors. Sexual, not sensual. Just sexual, hypersexual behaviors because of their wounding. That's their background. They were brought up on it. They were tormented with it. And so they became that thing that, you know, an abuser becomes, you know, abused, and then the abused starts abusing themselves sometimes. So that's not what we're talking about. Those types of folks, naturally sexual, they're just wired that way perhaps, or it's something from former lifetimes if you believe in that, or childhood wounds. It just kind of happens that way. Again, it just ends up going that direction. They're just seemingly naturally sexual. But then there's naturally sensual. Naturally sensual is different in that folks that are naturally sensual are almost, instead of just like addictive oriented, that's sexual. They have, the sexual are the people with almost like past life slave harem, you know, harem slaves. That's some of their energy. There's a craving. I get most turned on when I'm fantasizing, and then bigger is always better, faster is always better, intense is always better. You know, there's a coldness to it, there's a hardness to it. And in ancient traditions, including Tantra, and in yoga as well, the concept of hot, like, oh man, hot sex, hot, heat, is referred to, the word is synonymous with the word shallow. So the hotter your sex has been in the past, technically, so sorry guys, but technically it's been more shallow. Unless there was love and respect and the heat came from the love and respect, which is actually rare, and you know, it's more rare, but it can happen. But for most people and your dang TV shows and magazines that are selling people on, you know, you look at your magazines, I won't name any names, Cosmo, you know, and you flip to them and they say, you know, 10 things you need to do to heat up your sex life, or 10 things to have hot sex. Just forget it, man. Because those magazines aren't going to teach you about love and respect. So they're going to miss that, all right? So keep it in mind. It's not the heat we're looking for, and that's what the natural sexual people are doing or feeling. It's different. Natural sensual, as I was getting to, is almost more like when they think of their bodies, or when they think of union, love, they almost like start to move, you know, they just almost like dancing. Their body just is sensual. They move, and it can become sexual, but they're moving. They're enjoying. They're not like, you know, yeah, I want some. You know, there's no game playing. The naturally sensual people have a healthier sexual concept inside. You know, the sexual is like they're players, man. And some of you have fallen in love with players. Some of you have fallen in lust with players. But it doesn't really make any sense because they're just players. They're game players. So sensual, and you can be the sexual and listen to this talk and you can actually shift over to the other. But you'd have to be honest about where the other's coming from. You can't just pretend it's not there, the hypersexual. You have to look at it and want to heal those wounds. You have to want to know God more, love more, spirit more, oneness more, and true love. Those things will help you be able to segue because you'll say, you know, with those in mind, I can't seem to settle anymore. And then you start deepening your experiences. And remember to deepen and make warm, not hot sex. Warm. You know, it's like, yes, yummy. You know, yummy. Wow, this is so nice. Not yummy, you know, because that's carnivorous. I'm going to devour this sexual experience. Got to get you. And people are like, oh my God, that scene in that movie. Oh, you know, getting all wowed by it. You know, that's not the inner divine. That's just the inner moron, you know. The inner divine looks for the breadth, the width, the depth, this wow. Yeah, connecting. It's not like, go get it, you know? Sick 'em, you know? It's not all devouring oriented like the other kind of sex. So the sensual, the naturally sensual are people that may have in past lives, they may have memories of being not harem slaves, but rather the original form of a geisha or a sacred prostitute, it's called. Words that some people won't understand and won't respect, but sacred prostitute, they're people that understood, I have been in a place where I knew how to do healing with people, even sexual healing. You may not understand it. There's also a group called tantrikas, tantric practitioners. And oh my God, they were masters. They were absolute, like almost the same as Buddhist masters, mystics, but they took it to the physical level. So they would have a person come to them and they would be loving to them, like counselor mixed with musician, mixed with muse, mixed with sensual partner, just this, and mixed with masseuse, you know, all these different areas, topics, you know, just to be present with a person and help them and say, what's happening for you today? I'm just feeling sad. And then going into that on a visceral somatic level, it's just brilliant. And 1 in a billion today could be said to practice like that. You know, 1 in I'm exaggerating, but 1 in so many, it's very rare. But they wouldn't be the types to advertise hype. They wouldn't be the types to advertise stimulation. There are people, though, that are, you know, they try to be there for another person. There's a movie, what's it called, guys? The Therapist. That's Helen Hunt, I think, played a sex therapist and a sex surrogate, which is the next level. Sex therapist could be a counselor. Sex therapist is one. Sex surrogate means I'm here to make love with you and help you. And she's working with a guy who was quadriplegic and allowing him to experience things that his heart and soul were missing and longing, and you know, it really brings a person to a sense of healing. So it's quite beautiful. In any case, you know, there's also lastly, with naturally sensual people, there's a maturity level that's different. People that are sexual can look mature. You know, I've got money, I'm successful, I'm 70 years old, or whatever, by age, whatever, by finance, they look, you know, mature. Sensual, naturally sensual people usually can be more mature, meaning if they have a sensual experience, a sexual and sensual experience, they know how. Truly, like if you get into sexual experiences, you may think it's sensual, but it's usually not. It just looks that way. Sensual is different. There's a cooler feeling, longer lasting, more loving feeling. And people in the sensual, they're more responsible and mature. So they know how to say, this can be sexy, beautiful, could be very arousing, beautiful, just all beautiful in every respect. But they know how to say, this is about me. if we enjoy each other, you're not giving me an orgasm. You're not giving me an awakening sexually. It just looks that way if one seems to be helping another. We're sharing this. But at the end of the day, what happens for me, like it or hate it, it's me. If I like this experience, it's reflecting something in me. And if I don't like it, it's reflecting something in me. So that's a responsible soul. A sensual soul knows how to be mature and responsible. They don't do projections. You jerk, you had sex with me and you dumped me. Well, didn't you say it was a beautiful thing? Yeah, but you should have stayed forever. Transference. You're overly crediting them as giving you a wonderful thing. You had the wonderful thing. Okay? It looks like you had it with them, but they were just playing a role. It was you. You should give yourself credit. And same, the opposite, the projections. I didn't like the way this was, and so on. Like I said, you could even get transference and love somebody and dig the experience, turn it over to projection, and blame them for not staying longer or whatever. So watch out. Transference, projection, that's going to usually come from unhealthy people that clearly aren't dealing with maturity. So, but these natural, we're getting into spontaneous orgasms. They can come from being wired a certain way. They can come from genetics. They can come from hormones being a certain, ratio, kind of, really flooding, a lot of hormones at different times in our lives. It can also be like strong, like repressed desire. It could be strong repressed emotions from childhood where you weren't allowed to like speak or be yourself. So that could build up and become this tension volcano ready to blow. But it can also be just current sexual desires that, eventually, gotta release this somehow. So those are examples of what makes a person seem a little more wired for that. You may not be wired or very easily naturally sexual or sensual, I should say. And you may not also be very easily naturally wired for this thing, spontaneous orgasms. And it's okay. Find love and respect as your first goal. Keep that in mind, all right? Now, so the first one. So why when we work certain muscles and they get fatigued, do I have sometimes spontaneous orgasms? Well, there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, there's two things happening when the muscle gets fatigued. Muscle groups, or a muscle, when it gets fatigued. So just bear with me here. One thing that happens is the muscle's been worked so much, so intensely, whether it's a long workout or a physical thing you're doing. It could be painting. You can be hanging pictures in your house. But certain muscles could get fatigued enough. You can be standing doing weeding and your legs might start, the shaking, and they get kind of fatigued. So the muscle, what's happening is the muscle is having to give up. It's like it starts to shake because it's gone to the point of where it cannot bear more. When it does that, it is technically surrendering. And when we're in a state of surrender, we do lend more, towards possible releases. If you've got the other things, meaning hormonal, the repressed feelings, desires, you're just in the mood. When all that other list of things is kind of there and you fatigue a muscle, it can come surging through. Or if you're naturally sexual or if you're naturally sensual, these things can kind of come through. But the muscle is going to get like to a place of it's getting fatigued, and then it kind of releases. But when it releases, it's feeling two things emotionally. The muscle's having an emotional experience. It's feeling fear, believe it or not. It's feeling fear and panic. So, because I can't hold it. So the muscle's doing like Scotty on Star Trek, Captain, we can't hold it any longer, So the muscle's like, boom, 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 it's building, and then boom, it surrenders. And that moment, just half a second, fraction of a second prior, it is panicking. It is having fear, because fear and anger are related to some of these spontaneous orgasms. So that's one of the things happening. A couple of the things happening. The muscles are getting fatigued. There's this fear, and it's losing control. And when we lose control, there's a surrender and a panic. Two things: surrender and fear/panic. And both of those can be associated. I don't know what to do. Oh my gosh! And then you can't defend anymore. See, the muscle's defending itself, and it starts to shake because it's trying to hold on longer, and it can't. So when it begins to recognize, I can't hold, Then if there's repressed feelings, they start to go, you can't keep us back any longer. They, sometimes come through. So it can be an orgasmic release. It's kind of sounding strange, but bear with me because it gets stranger. All right, so, and I've worked with a lot of women and men, but I worked with a lot of women with a technique where they tell me, they can't have orgasms. Or sometimes they tell me, oh yeah, I have orgasms. They're great. They're just intense. When I'm with somebody, I'm having, orgasms. And I can tell when it's an authentic love-based orgasm versus the opposite, fear or anger or something else. So I'll say, let's do a little exercise. Or if they say, I'm really so, oh God, I'm just craving intimacy or sex or something, I'll say, well, let's wrestle. We do an exercise, a wrestling exercise. Specific words I will recite during it. And I don't mean wrestling like where you try to defeat somebody. I mean just the bodies kind of moving together and working and tensing together. Very, just like so. Just really as many muscles engaged as possible. And we do that, and many people have then, boom, they have an orgasm. Or they just enjoy the visceral feeling. And that's kind of cool. It's a little hard to understand this. I'm just doing a quick talk on it, so it may not make sense to some of you, but there's a lot of value to it. But some people have orgasms, and then they'll say, wow, I just had an orgasm from that wrestling, Michael. And they'll say, that was as good an orgasm as when I'm having sex. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, and they'll say, why was that? Well, what were you thinking about when we were? Now, it's not that this is the only thing I have them thinking about. One of the emotions I have them thinking about when we're wrestling is anger. So I said, what were you thinking about when we're doing the exercise? Well, you asked me to focus on anger. So you were thinking about anger and you had an orgasm. They start going, uh-oh. So that means, because it felt exactly the same, it's a possibility that when I was having orgasms with my partner or partners, I was actually an angry individual at the time. Yes. Major, epiphanies, but also rude awakenings for some, because we're like, God, I'm just so in touch with my sexuality. I'm enjoying that I have orgasms, when in fact you're having angergasms, or whatever. It's not quite what you thought. So I've worked with people like that, and it's also, the wrestling is getting the muscles to fatigue. That's, just like you're asking about why the muscle fatigue and then release. And many a times I've worked on people doing body work. I can't have orgasms. Okay, well, here. And then I do some holding muscle groups, or holding a muscle, and, meaning a point, or, however I'm contacting it, but holding muscle groups. And it could be on the hip, it could be in the stomach, wherever. But I hold specific groups or muscles, and I hold them and hold them and hold them as they're releasing, relaxing and releasing, and then boom, just from working a muscle. We're not even having them work it, just from contacting a muscle, because for various reasons, a person can actually become potentially orgasmic, but they use certain muscles in the body to keep it from happening without realizing it. It could be because they were shamed because they made noise once having sex, or it could be their own mind, or it could be their upbringing, religious, cultural, family, that's naughty, that's bad, so they, I better not. Now those muscles that got in the habit of holding come along, work the muscle, open the muscle up, boom, and then all this stuff, all this energy, all, this even pleasure, we could call it, is released because the person, we were able to move that stuff out of the way. All right, so leading to another question here, very similar question. And by the way, those, when I'm doing the wrestling and the words I use and the movements I use are specific, so don't try this at home, okay? Well, you could, but I'd have to explain it a little more. Next question, why is it that when my body relaxes enough, muscles get warmed up, like it could be hot tub or just relaxed, snuggled in pillows or whatever, when my muscles get warmed enough, why do I sometimes have orgasms? It's because they're not just getting warm, they're actually getting relaxed. What's the common denominator from the first thing I shared? You're surrendering. whether it's you're surrendering because you can't work that muscle and defend it anyway, and that's what it, remember, it's what it's doing. Your muscle wants to defend itself, so it starts even shaking. That's a defense. It's a last vestige of a defense. It's like, yeah, I can't do it. Instead of just working, like hammering, pictures, putting pictures up, and then the arm getting fatigued. It doesn't just stop. It goes from workable to becoming fatigued and then done. And in that fatigue, there's a panic, but there's also a sense of just about to surrender. So it's the same with warmth. The muscles get warmed up, they get relaxed, and then I'm so relaxed I can't defend because I don't need to, but I'm not defending. And so, boom, here it comes. All that was kind of waiting and hidden under that. Okay? And I could, that particular thing, that relaxing thing, I could demonstrate that here and many of you would respond, but I won't. First, because this is an internet show shown around the world. Second, because who knows, your mother could be watching. But there's exercises I could show you that involve guiding you through visualizations or exercises, and that if people could just understand it, orgasms aren't about stimulating, they're about relaxing, getting out of the way. Because orgasms are a metaphor of safe enough to let go. That's not the way people have orgasms. What they do is override safe enough, because that's usually not safe enough, and they say, well, we don't have safety. You know what we do have? Stimulation. Rub, 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 and then boom, forcing an orgasm. That's not an organic. It's forced, it's contrived, it's mechanical. It's, made up. But instead, when we relax enough. So we're typically tensing. Even when people are being sexual, they tense up, grab each other, but there's tension involved, which is the opposite of love, trust, letting go. So when we do this together, and if I were guiding you, I could describe certain things. I mean, I'm doing a little bit in my mind, but I could describe certain things, and in the body, there's an unwinding that happens. We start like this, and then there's an unwinding. You can do this for yourself. If you end up saying, oh, Michael's talking and I'm getting stimulated by it, don't say that or I'll bill you for it. That's just a playful way of saying, don't put it on other people. Just enjoy that you are grateful that you're being guided or taught, but it's you. I'm grateful that I'm opening up. And it unwinds, and you unwind. You don't need wine to unwind you. You don't need drugs to unwind you. I feel so much more relaxed when I take a little such and such pill, or just trusting. My body's kind of relaxing this direction and this direction and this direction. Just, there's no reason to be afraid. There's no reason to hold. And I'm not really fully taking you into a visualization. I'm just giving you a hint of it, just unwinding. And if all you feel is, oh my gosh, I feel a little peaceful, that's an orgasm. If my describing this, no need to be afraid, no need to defend, brings up tears, that's an orgasm. Feeling a peacefulness is a spiritual kind of an orgasm. It's a mystical kind of experience. To say I had some tears, that's an emotional kind of an orgasm. It's beautiful. Get away from shaming. Get away from shaming that you've had certain history. Get away from shaming that you have certain feelings, sensations, and get away from, even if you're the opposite. Oh my gosh, I'm feeling ashamed because I've gone without for so long. And to some people, it's like it's been months. Come on. Other people years. And some people have never in this lifetime had sex. And you need not be intimidated, afraid, or ashamed of that. I think it's beautiful. Why? I'm saving myself. I think that's beautiful. I want certain integrities and I won't give in anymore. I think that's gorgeous, man. Don't shame yourself. Too many experiences, not enough experiences. Don't bother, because that's not sacred. Love yourself. A lot of people don't know. I've shared this, I think, once or twice. A lot of people don't know that I was celibate for 15 years. So I want you to soak that in for a second. 15 years. You know, and some of you were like, no way. Or how did he do that? Or why did he do it? 15 years celibate. But when I turned 16, I said, enough is enough. Okay, next. Next question is, why is it that, let's see, somebody's asking about why is it that some teachers recommend sex for things like making up, makeup sex, or why is it that some teachers say sex is a great way to work off like tension, like even headaches? I remember somebody saying, there's a popular teacher, Louise Hay, in her book said, sex is a great way to release tension and tension headaches. Absolutely no way. It's clueless to say things like that. That's not sacred. Never should you use a person for something like that. Get a damn massage. Just say, rub my shoulders instead of let's lay down. Just come on. There's other ways. Nor should you be used for such a thing. And then this thing, makeup sex, because they're asking about that. Do you believe in that? Is that sacred? They're saying in some of their emails to me. No, I do not. I'm not saying, you should make yourself feel bad. If you did it, you did it. It's just that if you ask me, makeup sex. Oh, isn't makeup sex hot? Yes, it is. / shallow. I already covered that. Makeup sex. Working, your tensions out through sex with people. For idiots. No offense, sorry, man, but for idiots. That's not real. That's not at all deep, real anything. It's just so ridiculous. Ludicrous. It really is. I remember when my middle daughter was a teenager. She had one of those teen magazines or something like it was a more like a mature type, not just a pop idol kind of thing, but it was more like a teen magazine. And she's reading that, and she came to me saying, "Dad, can I talk to you about this?" Sure. And she says, in the Dear Abby kind of section, a girl wrote in and said, my boyfriend and I, we have fights, and he wants to make up and have sex, but I'm upset because he hurt my feelings. He did something rude, or he hurt me in some way. What should I do? And the licensed, trained counselor, writer, columnist in this magazine said, well, you should do that. It's a nice way to bond. And my daughter said, that's wrong. And she's 15 or something at the time. I was so proud, not only of her, but that any human being could see how stupid that kind of advice was from an expert, and yet even a child knew better. I dig that. I love when even a child has the greater intelligence than the trained experts, because then you really know something's cool about that person, or that something's really ludicrous about the opposite. It was so obvious that, a dog would have ran from that particular magazine. So, it's so obvious. Anything with a brain would just know. No. So please use your common sense. All right? Love, man. Find that love. Where's the integrity? So the relaxing, the letting go, I'm having greater levels of trust. I'm having greater levels of release. And that lends towards spontaneous orgasms for naturally sexual, but better still, naturally sensual individuals. Now, what about a different type of sensual, release? In other words, not just spontaneous orgasms, but something that's happening energetically. It's not like you're just working out and it opened up physically. What about when you're actually having what's called astral experiences, higher dimensional or other dimensional experiences? So some folks here is asking, they're asking, what is energy sex, or what is astral sex? And they had it worded in different ways, so I just kind of again distilled it down to one. But there are healthy and unhealthy versions of this. So let me explain and elaborate a bit. Energy sex can happen in, generally speaking, 3 different ways. There's a spiritual experience of energy sex. The spiritual is the highest. Spiritual means something about you. It could be past life makeup, this life, could be vulnerability, it could be you're surrendering, you're going through a dark night of the soul and you're surrendering to Spirit, help me. Whatever it is, or your devotionalism, sincerity, great integrity, different things can lend towards this, but you just happen to be ready for not a man or woman to reach to you and touch your body and give you an orgasm genitally. Instead, Spirit reaches its hand into our soul and ignites us. And there's just this ecstatic explosion. It's quite beautiful, obviously. It causes ecstatic releases. I mean, visionaries seeing Mother Mary have had this where their body arches just like orgasmic arching, that sometimes happens. The bodies arch, there's sometimes convulsions. It's all very similar. In fact, the muscle fatigue, it looks similar. There's this kind of releasing. Sometimes when you cry a lot and you're, how's that not similar to orgasm? It is similar. People just are messed up in the way they see things. It's very similar. You just had a major release. It wasn't a genital sexual release, but you had a version of an emotional orgasm, which comes either from being accessing wounds in some way, current or past, or sometimes joy. Just, oh my God, crying, and having an emotional release, an ecstatic release because I'm so happy. This experience with you being so sensual and safe, I'm so grateful. That's still an emotional release. And people say, oh, but I'm not having an orgasm. I'm sorry. Why would you apologize? You had some tears, and I think that's an orgasm. It's beautiful. Thanks for sharing it. It should all really, really be beautiful like that. But the spiritual orgasms, that is not something a person can give you. That's something that would come from Holy Spirit, angels, very high level spirit beings, but they are spirit beings. They're not physical beings with a high spiritual quality, just very, very they're spirit beings. All right, now, fewer of you have that than have had the other type, but I'm naming it anyway because it's one of the types that can happen. The next type is closer to home, more like astral or from astral plane, meaning the other side of death. It's that next realm. The astral world, the fourth dimension, or even fifth dimension, but once you get there and higher, it starts to become almost a spiritual orgasm. But yeah, some fifth dimensional beings could be included in this particular category. So energetic orgasms. And I want to again say there's healthy types and there's unhealthy types. So the healthy versions of astral-based sex, those can happen with astral beings, but they're positive beings, light beings. It could be a deceased loved one who's still with you and saying, honey, I'm here, and would you like to experience me? It's not like they're actually on the other side going, listen, biting their astral fingernail. Oh my God, I'm really craving. You mind? No, that's not what's I'm talking about. That's not what's happening. I'm saying there's still a love. For it to be positive, healthy, there also needs to be agreement on some level. It doesn't mean you literally have written, if anyone's out there that would like, here's my signature. It just means on some level it feels agreeable. It's never coerced. It's never forced. It's just, this feels loving. It's just beautiful. You can even have astral experiences that are, believe it or not, parts of yourself making love to yourself, and it creates like, wow, this is just wow. Like, who was that? Don't credit, don't name, just have your experience and learn more and more to make it about you. All right, please. There are unhealthy forms of the astral or other dimensional, sex. The unhealthy would be obviously exactly the opposite. Sometimes you've got dark beings. You've got it would be without permission. And you could say this includes people too, but I'm going to get to that in a sec. I'm talking about purely beings that are in the astral world. So you have darker beings, but there are mischievous beings that tamper. So you have to watch. Also in this category, sometimes there are even elemental beings could be included in this category, but that could also be included sometimes on a physical sexual experience. So you have spiritual, you have the energetic or astral rather, and then you have physical or human sexual experiences. So I'll get to that one in a sec. Back to the middle one. The negative, the unhealthy ones can even be your ego triggering wounds, shames, and you're having like a sexual experience and it's like, I felt somebody touching me. Even if you had an orgasm, it doesn't mean you did something wrong. Wind blows, the breasts respond, the nipples respond. Just if you had a yucky being and you still had an orgasmic experience, you're going to feel confused by it. And that's exactly what they're there for. They want to cause, mess you up and cause confusion. Don't take that personally. Your body responded. Big deal. That's the body. That didn't mean you were giving permission for unhealthy to have its way with you. You didn't do anything wrong. But knowing that this is happening, you still have to say, hey, you know what? The ego's trying to push me into feeling guilty and ashamed. No. Done. Call in the Holy Spirit and then picture feeling filled with light, surrounded and filled with light, the presence of peace, the hands of God over me, even blessing the fact that I was just with some yucky thing and I feel a little confused and ashamed. Just let the light of God shine light upon you and transmute all of the strange feelings you might have, even on a cellular level. Okay? The third and final category of otherworldly kinds of sex is that it's you still. You could be in your bed, you could be working out at a gym, but something happens to you. But we're connecting now not to spontaneous orgasms, but remember it's when other beings are involved and not there physically. So there's spiritual, there's astral, and physical. Physical, though, in this case means you're here physically, you're having physical responses, and from beings that are in the physical world, they're just not with you in the room. How could that happen? Well, you could have somebody you're in agreement with, sexy kind of playful relationship, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to bed. All right, I'm going to send you some thoughts, and let's imagine making love. Those kinds of things can happen. Projecting the mind into the presence of someone else and having even physical responses. You could sit in the same room without contact and, send the thoughts and somebody could respond. If they're wired like that and have that natural, sensual, sexual kind of nature, which is neither good nor bad, it just is, and so it happens. We don't want to ever get to going, I need that, I wish I had that, I don't have that, I'm not complete. You don't go into those games of the mind. You just look for love and respect, and then the rest can be built over time if you want to learn how to do that. So there's people that are alive and you're sort of having a cooperative experience. It's agreed upon. There's a permission given, and so it's all right. And in that category, you can sometimes even have beings that are in the physical realm, not too far off, elemental beings. Believe it or not, the Catholic Church into the Middle Ages, Dark Ages and Middle Ages, had a law that said people, men and women, must not, it's against the law, have sexual interaction with elemental spirits, nature spirits or elemental beings. And that, you go, wait, why would they have to put that in there? Because it was happening. Beings would do that. The legends around Merlin is that his mother was a human mother and his father was a salamander spirit or a nature spirit of sorts. Okay? There are such things, believe it or not. They're not just fables. Those things have happened. There are beings that are malicious and some that are, beautiful, wonderful, well-meaning, benevolent, but why would they connect? And that leads us to sort of our closure. None of these experiences can happen without everyone sensing on some level, these beings sensing on some level that you're open to it. Your sexual confusion could attract a being that loves preying upon people with sexual confusion. Your repressed sexual desires. Some of them are out there. It's like the word spirits. When you say, I'm going to go out to the bar and drink some spirits. Why do they call liquor spirits? Because in the old days, there were people that recognized that these kinds of places were filled with spirits, souls, not spiritual like God's spirit, but spirits, souls that were looking for beings that were more susceptible for them to inhabit or cling to or attach to. And people that are in an altered state, drugs, alcohol, are susceptible. So the place where you go and drink spirits, you're actually drinking spirits and making yourself vulnerable or susceptible to spirits. Just an aside. Okay, now, same with this. When you're craving, if you have sexual addiction, sexual craving, sexual repressions, it can attract. Extreme emotions can easily attract emotionally unstable beings on the other side. Predatorial. Sometimes they're just discarnate, dead people who are, looking for something to get off, and no pun intended, but to get off with, whether it's attaching to them when they're drinking or whether it's a sexual experience. Okay? So, healthy or unhealthy, astral or human, it's all, the sexual contact can only happen when the other beings sense that on some level they have permission. It's not that you said, I'm giving permission. You gave permission by being in that susceptible state. Now, I don't mean for you to think that I'm saying, oh my God, I better not think about anything. Drinking, sex, nothing. I'm not saying that. I'm saying when it's extreme enough, it attracts things. But if it's going to attract, get in a good state. Get in such a good state that when you pray, you're doing the same as you would if somebody were massaging you or stimulating you in a soft, loving way. Go into prayer and say, here I am, God. It's not that you're trying to turn it into a sexual experience. It's the same level of, see, I'm gonna let tensions go. I'm gonna relax and have this person, my partner, pleasure me or kiss me or whatever. It's so nice. Instead of hot sex, it can be so beautiful when soft, and it becomes a deeper experience when soft. So take it that direction, work with it like that. And when you're praying, here I am. It's energetically, intention-wise, it's the same. May not seem like it's the same, but the intention behind it is relaxing, calming, being, and things happen spiritually and energetically. But remember, you have to give permission. So if ever it doesn't feel like there's permission or whatever, you just say, back off. You have the right. You have the power to do that. Just, it's kind of like, tell these idiots to get away. Just come on, man. I'm looking for the light of God. How you guys doing? These beings don't dig that when you hold that presence. Back off, man. I'm not here for you. Go to the light. You'll have great orgasms if you go to the light. Go get off in the light. Because if they go, it'll transmute their stuff. So it's pretty cool. But don't let them have power like physical predators. At the end of the day, everything I just talked about in terms of the healthy and unhealthy do's and don'ts, it's no different than I would advise you or would advise you if you were asking about physical partnerships, the physical world, material partnerships. Same advice, which would be love, respect, whether it's astral or human. Love and respect. Depth. Slow down, man. Not stimulate. Slow down. Deepen the experience. That takes the love and spreads it through the body and being. And it gets to the point where you realize, I'm not even a body anymore. Not because you're dissociating in an unhealthy way. It's you're realizing because you go to the body, build the body awareness, and then beyond the body into this, oh my God, I'm feeling love. And the love will turn into light and bliss as well, if you hang in there long enough and properly. But the body, you're there at first to some degree, but you deepen and slow down. That'll help you deepen. And then to a place of, wow, I just feel full. I feel alive. And it's not based on stimulation. It's not size of breasts and genitals and this and that. It's not bodies, perfect shape and fat-free, wrinkle-free. That stuff just is ridiculous. And I use words, ludicrous, idiotic, and some people, gosh, those aren't very spiritual words. They're perfectly spiritual words, because they express how ridiculous the other can be, the non-spiritual world. That realm, the ego, doesn't get it. And you and I are the ones who have to teach to people around us, and including ourselves, but also the people around us, that there's an alternative, the real thing, love, orgasms. When a person looks at you and whistles and, hey, baby, boy, if you had a guy like me or a girl like me or whatever they're saying to you, have this attitude, because it's a true attitude, which is you have no idea you're telling them with your mind. You have no idea. Oh, man, I bet I can give you an orgasm. You have no idea. Nothing you can do to stimulate me could compete with the I am. The orgasm of who I am is way beyond anything any body could ever do for me. Know that and own that. The power is you and lies within you. To share that with someone else, spiritually, astrally, physically, humanly, is a beautiful experience, because it means two, not just one, two people have decided to put aside all the programs, all the programs of life that tell us, the programming that tells us it's all done differently, and they were mistaken. All right? I pray that this has made sense. I really do. And thank you, those of you who are still watching. For all I know, everybody's clicked off because it was too weird, maybe. I don't know. But many blessings, I swear, man. Thank you so much. And thank you for creating a space for me, because this becomes a sacred sexual experience in the sense that we're talking about such deep and vulnerable and sexual-oriented topics in a way that you guys are creating a vessel and asking questions like you did, that I can enter that vessel and sort of dance with you and say, okay, what question do you have? It's this. Okay, here's my answer. See, it's a dance, a very beautiful, sensual dance, and an acceptance that's happening. Accepting. I accept that you have those questions. There's not a judgment. I accept that you're allowed to say, but, Michael, I really also love intense sex. No problem. I'll just tell you what it is. Want to wrestle? It's anger or whatever, and teach about it without judgment. I think that's so beautiful. I, as a teacher, feel grateful to have spent so many years, the writing, the teaching, and the work, with people individually in such a profoundly deep, scary, vulnerable area that it's orgasmic in a sense for me or you to be in those positions to teach others, because you're going into that place of letting go, and it brings joy to see the numbers of people, the tears of joy, the tears of sadness and wounds and abuses, crying away. God, I just feel such an awe, such a bliss orgasm of appreciation. It's just so, to me, it's just so beautiful and so amazing. I feel a little bit sad and bummed that I gave that up and stopped working there for all kinds of reasons. But because of sometimes the difficulties it causes people. Also because of my role as a spiritual teacher, it gets extra confusing to some people. And just so on and so on. There are other reasons, but those kinds of reasons, I set it aside. A little bit bummed because of knowing how much good it brought to a lot of people. But again, I've taught enough people, and I take moments like this to say something about it, teach you, and hopefully you guys can go and do it. And I've written about it, so you could read. I've written 2 books. One is an introduction to Tantra and sacred sexuality. I also have one on relationships and several other titles, but related to this topic. A great one on creating fulfilling relationships. But and they're all on my website or on wherever other places people buy books and so forth. But I don't know if it's Amazon or whatever, but my website has them. And another book called Sacred Sexuality, A Manual for Living Bliss. And that's one that has all these exercises and so forth in it on do's and don'ts for yourself and others, Kundalini exercises, and just I put as much as I could in there that would be easy to convey in book form. So that's downloading of all my, it's 10% of what I know, but it's all I could do in book form and what I could do at the time for people. So there's a lot in there, and it's full spectrum, really. All right. So blessings to you all. Lots of love to you. May you have really blessed spiritual, sensual experiences in your life, all right? Full body experiences at that. Peace be with you. Bye-bye.